So here's the question. If you were a college football coach and you had the opportunity to choose between these two players to lead your program to the promised land, who would you choose? I don't think that we're getting ahead of ourselves. I do think that these players are worth this discussion this early. And I do believe that we have enough sample size to actually compare them. Now, granted, you do have one that is a starter and the other one isn't. You also have one that's played in 3 games and one that's only played in one in terms of being the official starter. But we're still going to break this down because ideally what the goal is, and something I think would be pretty awesome to actually do, is in a few years, we can actually reflect on this video and see if we were either spot on or if we were just way the hell off. And what I want to do here is I want to start with the actual recruiting process, right? Then I want to go based off what we've seen. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to actually give you my ideas and my thoughts on who I would choose to lead my program if I were also a college football head coach. But before we actually dive into this, I just want to thank you guys for actually tuning into this. Thank you guys seriously so much. This is the first show that we actually put on with the CFB Whispers Show. My name is Cameron Rodriguez. I am the host of the CFB Whispers Show. So we essentially are going to be going over all the college football. We will be releasing another video in terms of what the expectations are with the show moving forward, when we're going live, who we'll have on, and then obviously what we'll be discussing predominantly. So excited to obviously really dive on into this. But for now, let's just talk about the comparison and the sample size that we actually have with these two highly touted prospects coming out of high school. Nico. For those of you who are actually more into the composite rankings, I did post that here so you guys can see below if you guys want to do that. But also I want to keep it pretty high level because, again, the sample size is pretty small. So we're just going to go based off 24/7 rankings altogether. And Nico comes in as the number 2 player in the class overall, the number 2 quarterback, and the number 1 quarterback in the state of California. DJ Lagway, on the other hand, he comes in as the number 3 player overall, number 1 quarterback, and the number 1 quarterback in the state of Texas. So if we actually compare them based off their recruiting rankings, it's pins and needles. Pins and needles. It really is up to you and based off what we've seen so far. So that's why I'm super excited to see what you guys have to say in terms of who you would choose. But before you do so, and before you actually drop that into the comment section, let me go over a few things. Let's start with Nico. Nico's actually not a true freshman. Nico is a redshirt freshman. At least that's what I believe he is. For those of you who know, you can actually correct me in the comment section. But he did not start last year. That's what I'm getting at. He actually was behind Joe Milton. Joe Milton got the nod last year with the Heupel offense. Heupel is an absolute animal. Heupel, it's so funny actually, because Heupel has completely convinced even the viewers, as in you guys, the fans, that he is a high-tempo, pass-heavy offense. But in reality, he's actually a run-heavy offense. And what he does is he'll use that run to open up the pass, the RPO, and then he's got playmakers all over the field in terms of the wide receiver position to where they can get behind the secondary. That's what creates the explosive plays. I believe this year they have Brew McCoy, who just came back from a ACL tear, if I'm not mistaken, and then they have Squirrel White, and then they have players like Thornton. The tight end position seems to be coming out of nowhere, and then the running back position is what essentially keeps this engine going, right? So when you combine all of that with a player like Nico, Nico is essentially the type of player that can do it all. He's already proven in 2 games that he can literally make every throw on the field. Now, the only thing that he's lacking is that experience, but he seems to be getting that. But what I think is crazy about Nico is that he's played in 3 games of which he is actually undefeated. Now, granted, before the season started, he was yet to play a home game. He was yet to play a conference opponent, and he was yet to play a away game. Now he's checked 2 of those boxes. He's officially played in front of Neyland Stadium, all of you Volunteer fans. He's also officially played on the road at NC State. He's still yet to open up conference play, so we'll see where that goes come that time in a week from now, because I am posting this video on a Friday. It is about 3:15 in the afternoon. Wanted to make sure I got this video out before obviously they end up having another game, and then obviously these numbers don't mean anything because then we got to do this all over again. But that conference play opens up in Norman next week. That is against Oklahoma. It was announced the other day that it is a night game. So we'll see where we're at come that time. But right now we're going to go based off what we have. And if we were to go based off him starting in that game, he did what he had to do against Iowa. Iowa, again, has a top 10 defense year in and year out. And again, Nico came in and did what he had to do. Now, that is a solid reason to give Tennessee and the Volunteer fan base something to be excited about. We've heard nothing about them being nothing but less than great, essentially, going into the offseason, coming into this year. They have started the season 2-0. But if you really want to get technical with this, and this is why I love doing this and why I want to break this down even more, Nico opened the season at home against Chattanooga. And I don't want to be a hater, but I have to throw it out there. Chattanooga is not a cupcake, guys. Chattanooga is a super cupcake. Nico had an opportunity to go in there and actually blow them away, and it's not that he didn't. I understand why Heupel wanted to pull his players. I get it. Due to conference realignment, obviously the expansion of the playoffs, you want to make sure that you get all of your depth, as much experience as you possibly can, because you want to make sure that you have those players ready and available come that time. So I get it. I'm not saying that he couldn't have done any better if he had stayed in there. I'm not saying that he could have done any worse. All I'm saying is that we have what we have, and that's all we have to go off of. Now that Nico came in and he did his thing, the only other box that he had to check off, aside from playing a conference opponent, is an away game. Here's where it starts to get weird for me. I don't like the idea that everyone wants to assume that NC State was this true road test, this true opponent. If you actually follow college football, you'll see that Tennessee's football schedule really isn't that difficult outside a few opponents. I don't want to get technical. We could obviously have a video about that later on. But for now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Cole Kublik actually, in his preseason playoff predictions, had NC State as a potential playoff contender. He might have even actually had him in his bracket, but without me knowing for sure, I digress. So without that, I'll just say this. Nico went on the road at NC State. Yes, it was a night game. Yes, he's yet to play an away game. Of course, it is always tough wherever you go in college football. If you're going to play an away game at night for your first away game, it's tough, right? But he went in there, and to me personally, it seemed like he struggled a bit. Seemed like the game was actually going to be pretty close going into halftime, but that Tennessee defense obviously started to build it up a little bit. They started to come out there. They obviously had that pick six right before the half. That created the separation. I believe that gave Nico enough comfort to actually settle into the game. And then, as you're aware, Tennessee ended up winning that game 51-10. Here's the thing with Nico, though. He had 2 picks in that game. And I've watched NC State. I believe they played like Western Carolina week 1, and they didn't look that sharp. I honestly thought that this game was going to be even worse than what it turned out to be. I was actually shocked that Nico ended up throwing 2 interceptions, but hey, you know what? We all have that development process, that development period where we go on the road. We have to do something for the first time no matter what. So, and that's exactly what he did. He still handled his business, and he still got out of there with the W, and that's all that matters. But let's flip our attention over here to DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway is a true freshman. This is his first year on the team. He didn't get an opportunity to sit behind anybody. Now, granted, that was the goal, right? If you listen to Billy Napier, Graham Mertz came back. This is Graham Mertz's team. DJ Lagway supposedly was supposed to have a role in every game. He was thrown in there in the Miami game. That game was completely out of control from the very beginning. Miami just dominated on both lines of scrimmage and just ran away with that game by the time Nico came in because Graham Mertz got concussed. I think that's a pretty hard spot to be in, especially as a true freshman. To see somebody you look up to have a concussion and then to have your number called, that's pretty tough. But I feel like he handled it really well, right? He had 2 series in the Miami game. He came in. The offense entirely looked completely different. He was moving the ball. It seemed as though Miami couldn't really stop him. Now, granted, I don't know if that Miami had the second strings in, third strings in. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he was still playing in that game after he knew that his mentor, someone he looked up to, was just knocked out of the game. And the composure that he displayed was through the roof. Definitely gives Florida fans something to look forward to as the coming years head their way. So here's the thing. In those 2 series, he threw 1 pick. But before he threw the pick, the ball was actually moving. There was some fluidity throughout the offense. And really, in reality of the whole thing, the only reason why the pick even happened was due to a tip ball. DJ Lagway was moving the ball. Now, when he had his second chance to come in that second drive, he led Florida to a scoring touchdown, right? Of course, that didn't make the score any better. Florida still ended up losing that game 41-17, but I believe DJ Lagway went 3 for 6 in those two drives, 65 yards, one interception, and of course he didn't have the touchdown because it was a handoff to Trayon Webb on the left side because of course they can't go right. That's the reason why Graham Mertz got concussed, because the right side of that offensive line is absolutely atrocious, but I'll digress on that as well. But let's just fast forward again to the following week. Obviously, Graham Mertz had to go through concussion protocol. He was not cleared. DJ Lagway gets the nod. He's obviously going to start. This is his debut. And what does he do? He comes in and does something that no one absolutely thought was possible because it has never been done. He came in as a true freshman, broke the UF all-time passing record in terms of yards in a debut for a freshman, and he had 462 yards. He was 18 for 25, 3 passing touchdowns, and he had 5 plays that were 40 yards or more. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the history of Florida football in terms of the quarterback play and the amount of Heisman trophies that they have won at that position, it goes all the way back to Steve Spurrier, and then it goes to Danny Warfel in 96, and then it goes to Tim Tebow in 2007. Here's what's crazy about this. Then, basically prehistoric times all the way to now, before conference realignment and before college football started moving into a place where they're going to be playing more conference games and less cupcakes, and it went from the P5 to the P4, those players that won the Heisman Trophy back in the day had multiple opportunities to throw for more than 400 yards, and they still didn't. So let that speak for itself. So for those of you who are out there saying, Samford, oh, it's Samford. Samford's not a good program. Homie, put your pads on, put your helmet on, stretch your arm, do whatever the hell you feel you need to do to give you an edge or at least somewhat of a chance to actually do what he was able to do. And I promise you, you're not going to be able to do that. He broke the record for a reason. It was his debut. And here's the kicker to all of this. He's actually living up to what his recruitment says he would be. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year coming out of high school. He already signed an NIL deal with Gatorade. He's been in several commercials before he even took a collegiate snap. And then for him to come in and break that record when Florida is notoriously known to having 3 Heisman Trophy winners, he put on a show, he put on a display that Florida fans probably haven't seen in a couple of decades. Now, granted, a lot of you want to reference Kyle Trask. I get that. Kyle Trask did his thing. He had playmakers all over the field. He had Trayvon Grimes. He had Kadarius Toney. Obviously, he had the All-American tight end in Kyle Pitts. I get that. But also, Kyle Trask had a line. Florida doesn't have a line right now. So for Graham Mertz, despite it being Samford, I'm sorry, not Graham Mertz. For DJ Lagway, despite it being Samford, to come in and do what he did, the ceiling is, there literally is no ceiling for this guy. So super excited to obviously see what he was able to do against them. Now, here's the kicker. I don't want to get too political with this because, my sources are saying that we weren't anticipating Graham Mertz to be a returner for the Florida program. That's one of the bigger reasons why DJ Lagway decided to commit. From what I'm hearing, I do believe Graham Mertz was going in. He put his name in to be graded for the NFL draft. It came out that he didn't like the grade, so then he gives a call. He's like, hey, listen, coach, I'm coming back. They didn't anticipate that. DJ Lagway obviously is the guy, but then turns out, the narrative in terms of the newspapers, all the analysts, everybody's coming out and saying, hey, listen, DJ, you're going to have to sit a little bit, learn behind this guy. And you know what I think is crazy about that is why would you learn behind somebody you're already better than? If your ceiling is already higher than somebody who has been in the league in terms of college football for 6 years, why would you be okay with that? But then at the same time, I digress. I understand development. I understand all of that. But we've seen in college football over the last couple of years that freshmen are coming in more often than not, and they're making big impacts on the team. And I think DJ Lagway could potentially be that guy, but at the same time, I also understand Florida, again, doesn't have that line, right? So the last thing Florida needs is for that right side of the line to give DJ a concussion, and then all of a sudden you have two quarterbacks that are just out. Now, granted, Graham Mertz is returning. I do think Graham Mertz is obviously going to potentially live up to his potential, maybe even take that next step. But for now, in that Miami game, in the 2024 season, the only thing Florida fans have to go off of is what they saw. That is the worst game that Graham Mertz played in a Gator uniform, so I do believe in giving him another chance, especially with the seniority and the leadership and the experience that he has going into the Texas A&M game this weekend. Of course, Mike Elko is a wizard when it comes to scheming up the defensive side of the ball. He obviously creates, defensive plays in terms that will confuse, quarterbacks, especially a young quarterback. But I do believe that DJ is capable. I just don't trust that offensive line. I also don't trust the play calling. I don't trust their coaches at the University of Florida to put DJ Lagway in a position to find success against somewhat of a decent opponent. The only thing I feel like we have in Florida's favor, right, is the fact that Graham Mertz is going to get that chance. And if he can't take that next step, we're going to be able to see if DJ can step in. I just don't trust that coaching staff in terms of their play calling. So we'll see what happens with that. But moving past that, all in all, these two players are really, really, really exciting. Every time they get the ball in their hands, it's like you don't know what's going to happen. It could be an explosive play. All you know is that these offenses are going to move as long as these two quarterbacks are in the game. DJ better be ready if Graham Mertz can't obviously move the ball. Very complacent. He's definitely known for that short to intermediate pass game. He definitely wants to check the ball down. He's not necessarily known for going deep. So what a unique combination there if you really think about it. I mean, you got one player, as in Graham Mertz, that is notorious for the check down and completing the short to intermediate passes. He can't extend the play because he's not terribly not athletic. But then you have DJ who can come in and essentially he can do everything and more because he's more capable of generating the explosive play. So we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, for now, based off what we've seen, I think it is fair to compare these two players. I do think that when they do play each other in the future, it's going to be even more exciting because they've already proven enough this early this year. I don't think it's fair, though, to compare these two players to each other if DJ doesn't get the start. Now, Billy Napier did come out in his press conference earlier this week leading up to the Texas A&M game and he said, we will have a package. We do plan on playing DJ in every game moving forward. However, we don't know how large or how small that sample size might be. That's obviously yet to be determined. We're going to be able to find out. But if DJ does get the nod, say Graham Mertz can't take that next step, or say Graham Mertz isn't capable of moving the ball, or maybe even Florida actually needs to a spark of some sort, and then DJ gets the nod officially as the starter moving forward, then maybe we can actually reassess, recompare at the end of the season. But I'll leave it at this. Chattanooga is not a top 50 defense. Hell, they're a P5 school since the realignment. NC State's not even a top 50 defense. They're also not a top 100 defense, despite the defensive line and offensive line returning as many starters as they did. They did definitely come into the season as an extremely hyped team. We'll see where they're at the end of the year. It seems as though NC State might have had a bad game, especially if you look at the last couple of years. They've been able to beat some opponents that they really had no business beating. But, again, I don't want to say anything negative about NC State because this show is definitely a show for college football, and we want to make sure that it doesn't matter what you're a fan of. If you have any type of opinion or if you just want to vent in any way, just make sure you leave your comments below. So I'd love to hear what you guys think about that, especially come season's end. But if you think about what DJ did in the two series that he had against Miami and one of those series leading to a score, in my opinion, after 2 weeks into this year's season, DJ's definitely played the better defense. I'll even go as far as saying if you take Miami's defense through 2 weeks into this year and compare that to the Iowa team last year, I still think Miami has the better defense. I mean, athletically, depth, all together, I think if you took Miami's defense and you plugged it in to really any team, especially a team going against a Michigan or maybe even Ohio State, I do think that it could possibly be a bit closer. I do know that Iowa tends to drop the ball when they play those teams. I don't think Miami's defense would drop the ball if they played those teams. I don't think that Miami would necessarily be a juggernaut and stop them. I don't necessarily want to give Miami all that credit because we are really early into the season. But for now, Miami's defense, in terms of their rush defense, does rank as the number 3 rush defense total in the country, and they also come in as the 7th ranked defense altogether in the country after 2 weeks. So, again, it's super early. We will see where this goes as the season progresses. But right now, I do think it's fair to compare these two. I'll leave you with this, though, and I want your opinion, and then I'll give my opinion. Through 2 games this season, Nico he's thrown for 525 yards. He has 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a QB rating of 79.1. DJ Lagway, he's only played 1 game as the official starter. Now, again, granted, it's Stanford. I get it. But Nico had that opportunity to do exactly the same thing against Chattanooga. It didn't happen. And because of that, and because of that, and DJ's only start, he's right on Nico's heels. That's why I thought that this was very interesting to compare, these 2 players to each other, not only from the recruiting rankings, but based off what they've done so far. And in 1 game, DJ has 487 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, an 82.7 QBR rating. Now, I don't know who you guys are going to choose. That's why I'm super excited. If you guys were a college football coach, who would you rather have lead your program to the promised land? That is the theme of this entire show. So make sure to leave that comment. And I'll make sure to review those and reply to as many as I can. But for now, how I'm going to end this is, again, my name is Cameron. I am the host of the CFB Whispers Show. This is the very first show that we are releasing, so we are super excited to kick things off. Yes, we are 2 weeks into the season, and we're going to be releasing more videos, and we're going to obviously be releasing a video, like I mentioned at the beginning, in terms of what the expectations are, what we're going to be covering, and who we'll have on the show moving forward. But if you guys have any ideas as to what you guys would like for us to cover, this is, again, a show for the people, so make sure to comment your thoughts, your ideas. I'll try and do everything I can to meet you guys in the middle. And at the end of the day, man, we have an incredible season ahead of us, and I'm so excited to get this started. Thank you guys again for joining me on this episode of the CFB Whispers Show. Until next time, always remember, we're here to talk ball. CFB Whispers out.